Hey everybody, one of the trademarks of my channel is that I don't run my mouth really hardly at all before I get into a story, and that is how I plan this channel to be. I just wanted to tell you a story. My channel is about the story, it's not about me. So that being said, I want to talk about something that's really important. When I started this channel back in October, I invited people to send me their encounters to be reviewed and possibly get up on the my channel, and that is the plan. However, I just didn't expect that I would get so many. So what I want to say, we've gotten a few of them up. I think we have about 30 videos up right now, and I don't know, maybe almost half of them are viewer encounters. And it takes about 3 or 4 hours to create a video that's worthy enough to be posted on YouTube. And I work a regular job and my time is limited. However, I want to tell you, and I mean this in all sincerity, that how important these encounters are to me. You took the time to think these through and write them down, and listen, I honor that, and it is extremely important to me. And if the encounter is written in a cogent way and not filled with cuss words, then it is going on the air, because all of them, every single one of them, are very intriguing, or they're full of information, or they're scary. And so I wanted you to know, if you have submitted an encounter, I'm getting to it, and I appreciate your patience. And please keep sending those in, because I will get every single one of them up. I just need a little time to produce the video. Okay, sorry to run my mouth. Let's get into some stories here. We're going to try to do 3 today. It's going to be a long video, but here we go. Okay, this first one is kind of short, but it's really good. I was born and raised in Washington State, but moved to southeast Missouri nearly 7 years ago. I'll be 38 next February and have spent a great deal of time in the woods camping, fishing, and bushcrafting. Though I have never personally had an encounter, the Bigfoot stories have always fascinated me, and there was a very interesting one I heard growing up. It had been told to us several times over the years, and I even met the grandmother of the girl who this happened to. The grandmother told me this is why the whole family moved off the mountain. My name is Michael, and my family moved to a place called Mount Bryan, part of a town in Kelso, Washington, which is also near the area of Mount St. Helens, when I was 3 years old. This story took place at the corner of what would be the property I grew up on, but it happened 20 years before we moved there. The house started as a one-room cabin, and the modern convenience of indoor plumbing and extra bedrooms were added later. The house is still 4 miles from any sort of town, and in some directions you can probably travel all the way to Mount St. Helens through pure forest. Even when I was young, there were few houses up there, but at the time this story took place, there were even fewer. There are 2 families, and they lived a mile or so apart. Their daughters were friends and would visit each other. One night, the daughters of these 2 families decided to have a sleepover at one of the homes and started walking the mile between the houses. One of the fathers decided to head down the road in the car and pick the girls up since it was getting dark, but the girls had already made it about halfway back, which I was repeatedly told was right at the edge of my folks' property. When his headlights shined on the girls, he saw something step over a fence and onto the road. It reached for one of the girls and picked her up by the head, like a basketball player palms a ball. This was never described as an attack. In fact, whatever this thing was grabbed the girl and lifted her up and seemed to try to look at her face. There were two witnesses to this, the other little girl and the father, who could clearly see what was happening ahead in the light from the car. They both described the thing as huge, stood on two legs, and was covered in hair that looked grizzled in the bright beams. Then the creature headed back into the woods carrying the girl, stepping back over the fence, and dropped the girl just inside the trees that stood next to the road. The girl was unconscious and stayed so for a couple of days. She had cuts on her head from what they thought were its fingernails. It was not long before the family moved away from the area. I heard the story many times from different neighbors who had known the family. The story didn't change from one telling to another, but we still took it as a grain of salt, knowing how tales can grow. But then one day, a woman came to look at some puppies that we had for sale. She was nice, but grew a little uneasy as the evening approached. My mom noticed this and asked what was wrong, and the woman retold the same story. It turned out she was the grandmother of the girl who had been grabbed by the creature. I have never seen a Bigfoot, but I've talked to people who claim to have both in Washington and here where I now live in Missouri, which is near where the Missouri Blue Man was seen during the late 1800s and early 1900s, and of course in southern Arkansas where the Boggy Creek monster was reported. Thanks, Michael, for sending that in. It's really cool when you hear a story and then it's validated years earlier. It makes them very believable. Thanks again, buddy. Second story we have is from Irwin County, Georgia, way down south. I thought this was interesting. The writer says, I have always been a hunter, an outdoorsman, and I am a shooting and firearms editor for 20 years. And what I heard in the woods that August afternoon really scared this old Vietnam vet, who was a Marine, by the way, and not too many things have scared me. This happened 25 years ago on Lizzie Jack Farm in Irwin County, Georgia. Lizzie Jack was our family farm and had been in my mother's family since before the Depression. My mother lived in my grandparents' 4,500 square foot brick home on about 500 acres. Since my father's death about 20 years before, I had managed our family farm and I was constantly out on the farm, moving roads or cleaning off deadfalls from the roads due to the frequent storms that visit this part of South Georgia. On that particular day in late summer, I was cleaning up roads because we had the trees thinned the previous winter. I was on my four-wheeler and had a chainsaw with me as well as a cooler of cold Cokes because it was about 90 degrees that day. After about a half an hour of cutting and stacking the many pine limbs that lay across the road, I heard a sound that I've never heard before. I have described it many times as the sound of a 1,000-pound relay chattering. The frequency never changed and it was really loud, even greater than the sound of my steel chainsaw. After a few minutes of hearing this, I was becoming a bit unnerved because in all of my years on the farm, I had never heard anything like this. We had the occasional bobcat or panther and lots of deer and other small game, but nothing like this. So I put down my saw and my axe and moved back towards the four-wheeler. I had my 1911 .45 pistol on my web belt along with my canteen and my first aid kit, but I felt a lot better when I climbed on the four-wheeler and pulled my Winchester M70 out of the scabbard. I quickly chambered around and sat on the four-wheeler with the 270 on my lap, drinking a Coke and smoking a cigarette. As soon as I chambered around in the rifle, the clicking stopped. I knew where the sound was coming from, a low area about 25 yards away. This area was surrounded by a lot of small brush and trees, but was a low area that filled with water after heavy rains. It was full of small pine saplings and cypress trees. You could walk through it if it was dry if you knew where the entrances and exits were, but you could not see through it from one side to the other for most of the year. I must have sat on the four-wheeler for 15 or so minutes before I put the 270 back in the scabbard after removing the round from the chamber and pushing it back into the magazine. Then I headed back to finish the work I had started. I had not even gotten halfway back to the brush pile before the clicking started again. It did not take me very long to head back to the four-wheeler where I again pulled out my 270 and chambered around back into the chamber. The same thing happened as before. The clicking sound stopped almost immediately. This time I grabbed the chainsaw, jumped on the four-wheeler, and got the hell out of Dodge. Whatever was making that noise sure did not want me there, and I was not going to wait for him to reply. I had put 530 grain bullets in it. I had no idea what it was because I never saw anything, nor did I smell anything out of the ordinary. I did not go back for several weeks, and when I did, I drove our big farm tractor and pulled our 8-foot wide bush hog, which I used to finish cleaning off the road. I did not see or hear anything unusual. If I had, I would have used the tractor and the bush hog to clean the brush in the area. Not too many things will mess with a 25,000-pound tractor. I did not think a lot about it until something happened later that year. Sure, I had asked my outdoor rider friends what they thought, but they knew about as much as me. Nothing. Some said it could be wild pigs, but I never saw any sign of wild pigs on our property, and they generally leave lots of signs in their presence. That winter, my youngest daughter and me were deer hunting in a large 50-acre field near this area. It was over 600 yards long and 300 yards wide, shaped like an L. We were at the bottom of the L, my daughter looking down the 600-yard leg and me watching down the 300-yard leg of the field. We both had high-power binoculars, and I had a 300 Win Mag rifle, and my daughter had her .223 Remington. Both were fitted with high-powered scopes. We had seen nothing, and it was getting pretty dark when my daughter whispered, "Daddy, there is a man walking in the field." I looked in her direction, but I could see nothing. She said that he had walked into the woods. I asked her what color he was, and she said he was black. I asked her how tall the man was, and she said he was half as tall as the trees on the other end of the field. Well, that would make the person 8 to 10 feet tall. I never saw it, but she did. I loaded her on the four-wheeler, and we headed back to the house. It was then I started to consider that what I had heard and she had seen could have been a Bigfoot, especially after a banker from a nearby city met one about 10 miles from our farm. John, thank you for sending that in. That is very compelling in my view. Thank you, sir. This last story is sent to me by Levon from Arkansas, or the encounter happened in Arkansas. And Levon writes, "I want to thank you for responding to my email the other day in regards to mine and a friend's encounter with a Bigfoot/Sasquatch, or whatever one wants to call it. I enjoy your videos and wanted to share this story with you because I feel you won't think I'm crazy or making something up. Now for the story. I live in a small rural community of Johnson County, Arkansas. My town is 100 miles west of Little Rock and about 60 miles east of Fort Smith. We call this area the River Valley. It was roughly 2008. My friend and I lived about 5 miles north of town. Where we lived was somewhat hilly and had lots of wooded timber areas and clearings that farmers used for cattle and horses. One night we were visiting, and he told me that he kept having a feeling of something watching him at night from his window between the hours of 12 midnight to roughly 4 a.m. during the fall, winter, and early spring months. By the way, he told me of a cave system below his house called the Indians Post Office. I wonder if this is where the Bigfoot lives. I told him it was probably nothing, just his imagination running away with itself late at night. On more than one occasion, he would bring up these events or talk about the feeling of being watched, hearing odd noises, and finding things moved around. I asked him if he kept any dog or cat food outside at night or secured his trash can lid because it sounded to me like a bear was passing through looking for a quick meal on its nightly walks. I was a teenager at the time, and my curiosity had gotten the best of me, and we decided to stake out this bear one night. I grew up hunting and still am an avid hunter and outdoorsman, and I've heard and seen bear sounds and signs, but in all my experience in the woods would never prepare me mentally for what we were about to see that cold Saturday night. We waited for the time to go to make our shift blind behind an old cedar tree that was in the yard. Around 11:30 p.m. we got to our hiding place and waited, and like clockwork at 11:50 something came walking through the woods. His dogs behind the house started raising a commotion, and then they got real quiet. The creepy quiet when something odd is coming. We waited patiently. The only light in the area was my flashlight, and that wasn't very bright, and a big street lamp out on the road. We could see the trees moving as it pushed them out of its way, and then the creature made its appearance from the tree line. I think this thing was 7 to 8 feet tall. It had long, dark hair all over its body, and it walked in long strides with its arms swinging rapidly. It grabbed the top rail of a 5-foot-tall pole fence and jumped it like it was nothing and ran off into the ravine below his property. We stood there for a long time just speechless, and then reality finally hit us and we ran back into the house. We were within 20 feet of a Bigfoot. We heard it vocalize one of those screams you hear on TV or YouTube. We haven't imagined things. We were never able to get photographic evidence of the creature other than a picture of a huge handprint on the side of a friend of ours' Jeep one night. In the dust, you could make out a handprint with 4 fingers and a thumb. That picture has been lost due to his ex-wife cleaning out the hard drives on a computer when they divorced, but this story is 100% true. And if you need further information, please contact me here or call me at, he gives me his phone number. And thank you for reading my story. And if it's video worthy, please let me know. All I ask is that you not put my phone number in the story. Levon, that is absolutely video worthy, and I'm so thankful you sent that to me. I don't know when this it was 2008. I think you were a teenager, and I can't imagine being a teenager and seeing something this big walk through my yard. But that is really a cool story, and I appreciate it. Okay, that's going to do it for this video, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you.